Israel has launched a major attack on Iran, and this could escalate into a larger war. However, the United States is not just sitting on the side watching what is happening. The Donald Trump administration is directly involved. Mere hours after Israel attacked Iran, Trump told the New York Post that he knew about the attack beforehand. Trump said, quote, "I always knew the date because I know everything," end quote. And then he threatened Iran and said that he gave 60 days for Iran to agree to the very aggressive terms demanded by Washington. Iran refused. So on day 61, Israel attacked Iran with the support of the United States. Trump has repeated these comments in interviews with many different media outlets. Trump told Reuters that his top administration officials knew about the Israeli attack. They were in constant communication with Israel. He said, quote, "We knew everything," end quote. Trump told the Wall Street Journal exactly the same thing. And in an interview with ABC News, Trump made it clear that Israel carried out this attack in close coordination with the United States. Trump praised the attack and said, quote, "I think it has been excellent," end quote. And then he threatened Iran again and said, quote, "We gave them a chance and they didn't take it. They got hit hard, very hard, and there's more to come, a lot more," end quote. So the US is planning more attacks on Iran using Israel to wage this war. In fact, the Wall Street Journal admitted that the Trump administration carried out a very cynical strategy in which Trump claimed to Iran that he wanted peace talks. But this was actually all part of a scheme to attack Iran when Iran was not expecting it. The Wall Street Journal noted that the Trump administration told Iran it would partake in the 6th round of negotiations in Oman on the 15th of June. But in reality, despite all of these talks going on for over 5 rounds, the Trump administration was preparing to attack Iran using Israel. As the Wall Street Journal put it, it all, quote, "ended up being the perfect cover for a surprise Israeli attack," end quote. In other words, the US government never wanted peace. The Trump administration's so-called peace talks in Iran were actually an elaborate ruse and illusion to prepare for a secret war on Iran. And this was also admitted by Israeli officials. This is how the Israeli media described this cynical strategy. Quote, "The US participated in a massive campaign to lull Iran into thinking an attack was not going to happen immediately," end quote. Trump went out in the media and he said that he does not want Israel to attack Iran. He said that he wanted peace, but it was all a lie. The US actually wanted war, and behind the scenes, the US was planning the war. In fact, ABC News interviewed Trump administration officials who admitted that they were giving intelligence to Israel to help it carry out these attacks on Iran. So again, the US didn't just support what Israel was doing. The US was directly involved. As ABC News put it, citing Trump administration officials, the US provided exquisite intel. The US had advance notice of the strikes, and US officials said that the Israeli strikes will continue to be very intense over several days. The media outlet Axios, which is very close to the Israeli government, published an article that reveals the details of this cynical strategy. It notes that 2 Israeli officials said that Trump and his aides were only pretending to oppose an Israeli attack in public. In reality, an Israeli official said, quote, "We had a clear US green light," end quote. Axios continued saying the goal was to convince Iran that no attack was imminent and make sure Iranians on Israel's target list would not move to new locations. And in fact, this article also revealed how the US and Israel were manipulating the Western media, because a few days before Israel attacked Iran, the Trump administration and media outlets in Israel claimed that Trump had a phone call with Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and supposedly Trump was pressuring Netanyahu not to attack Iran, according to Western media reports. But in reality, Axios admits, citing Israeli officials, that this was all part of an elaborate scheme that they actually had lied to the Western media. And in reality, when Trump called Netanyahu a few days before the attack, Trump was giving his final green light. And by the way, after Iran responded to Israel's unilateral attack, Iran hit back in self-defense, and the US military was directly involved in intercepting and shooting down some of the Iranian missiles that were heading toward Israel. So not only did the Trump administration help Israel carry out the attack and give it intelligence and give it a green light and help to plan the operation, but then after, the US military directly got involved to protect Israel. So everything that happened was a joint US-Israeli operation. Israel was not acting alone, and Israel is not dragging the US into the war. The US approved this war. This was a personal decision made by Donald Trump himself to attack Iran. This means that when US Secretary of State and National Security Advisor Marco Rubio claimed that, quote, "we are not involved in strikes against Iran," end quote, that is a lie. That is completely false. So yeah, the US military didn't directly carry out these strikes, but the US gave Israel the ammunition, the missiles, the planes, and intelligence. The US government was involved in planning this operation. It knew about it for months, and Trump personally gave Israel the green light to carry out this attack on Iran, which is an aggressive act of war. Israel does not make significant military and foreign policy decisions without the approval of the United States. Israel is an extension of the US empire in one of the most strategic regions of the world. The former US Secretary of State Alexander Haig referred to Israel as an unsinkable aircraft carrier for the United States. And in fact, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said the exact same thing. He said that Israel is a, quote, "mighty aircraft carrier," end quote, of the US empire. In fact, Netanyahu himself is an American. Netanyahu was raised in the US. English is his main language. He went to high school and college and got his first job in the US. Netanyahu was a US citizen, not just once, but twice. So Netanyahu was a US citizen. He gave it up in order to become the Israeli ambassador. And then he got US citizenship again, and he gave it up a second time in order to become Israel's prime minister. But he is an American. Netanyahu has been a longtime friend of especially Republicans. He is a Republican, and he's been a friend of Donald Trump for decades. And under Netanyahu, and also under other Israeli leaders, the Israeli regime does not make important decisions without first getting the green light from the United States, because it's the United States that arms and protects Israel. The US gives Israel billions of dollars of military aid every year, weapons, ammunition, missiles, planes. Israel could not wage its war on Iran and Gaza and Lebanon and Syria without the support of the US. It would be impossible. Top Israeli military officials have repeatedly admitted this in interviews in the media, saying that if the US withdrew support for their wars would have to end. So all of these wars are not just Israeli wars. They are joint US-Israeli wars. And don't forget, the US also protects Israel and prevents any international institution from taking action against Israel